The blue flame danced against the steel like a vengeful spirit, sending sparks across Cormac Locke's weathered hands. Each drop of molten metal told a story of heat and pressure, of materials pushed beyond their breaking point until they became something stronger. He worked alone in his workshop, the steady hiss of the welding torch drowning out the October rain that hammered Silver Rock's corrugated metal roofs like machine gun fire. The clock on his cluttered workbench read 11:47 p.m., but sleep never came easy anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flames consuming everything he'd failed to protect. 3 months. 3 months since his brother burned alive in that garage fire, and the nightmare still clawed at him with razor talons every time exhaustion tried to claim him. Cormac had built this workshop with his own hands after coming home from Afghanistan, turning his disability payments and savings into a place where broken things could be made whole again. The irony wasn't lost on him now. He could repair any piece of metal, but he couldn't bring back the dead. Couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. The pounding started soft, like rain on glass, then grew frantic and desperate. Someone was at his front door at nearly midnight, and in Silver Rock, that usually meant trouble. Cormac killed the torch and lifted his welding mask, the familiar weight of it reminding him of other masks he'd worn in other wars. The pounding came again, desperate and small, not the heavy fist of an angry drunk or the authoritative knock of police. This was different. Afraid that he grabbed the crowbar from his workbench, the cold steel fitting naturally in his palm like an old friend. His left leg protested as he limped toward the house, the titanium rod that held his femur together aching in the damp coastal air. The IED that ended his army days had also ended his dreams of simple life, but it had taught him to recognize danger in its many forms. Through the peephole, he saw nothing but darkness. Then a small voice cut through the storm. "Uncle Cormac? Please help me." Junie. He yanked the door open. Ezra's 5-year-old daughter stood on his porch, soaked to the bone. Blood trickled from a cut above her left eye. Her pajamas clung to her tiny frame, and she shivered like a leaf in a hurricane. Jesus Christ. Cormac dropped to one knee, his legs screaming in protest, scanning her small frame for injuries. A cut above her left eye leaked blood down her pale cheek. Her little mermaid pajamas clung to her tiny frame like wet tissue paper, and she shivered like a wounded animal caught in a blizzard. "What happened? Where's your mother?" Junie's eyes were wide and glassy, the 1,000-yard stare he'd seen in too many soldiers who'd witnessed things no one should see. She reached for him with trembling hands that felt like ice against his skin. "Mom said I was a mistake." Her voice barely rose above a whisper, each word cutting through him like shrapnel. "Her man tried to put me under the water. I couldn't breathe. I ran here through the woods." Ice formed in Cormac's chest, spreading outward like poison through his veins. He scooped Junie into his arms, feeling how cold her skin had become, how her small body shook with more than just the October chill. This wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to kill his niece. "You're safe now." He carried her inside, grabbing his phone with his free hand while kicking the door shut behind them. "I'm calling 911. "No." Junie gripped his shirt with surprising strength for such small hands. "Please don't let them take me back there. Please, Uncle Cormac. They won't hurt you again. I promise." The words came out harder than steel, forged in the same fire that had shaped him in the mountains of Afghanistan. Some promises were written in blood, and this was one of them. The operator answered on the second ring, her voice professional but concerned. 911, what's your emergency? This is Cormac Locke at 1247 Copper Street. I have a 5-year-old girl here who's been assaulted. She needs medical attention immediately. Sir, can you tell me the nature of her injuries? Cormac wrapped Junie in his army blanket, the wool one that had kept him alive through 3 brutal Afghan winters, and examined her more carefully. Head laceration, possible concussion, evidence of attempted drowning. She's hypothermic and in shock. Ambulance is en route. Are you related to the child? She's my niece, Junie Locke. And where are her parents? Cormac looked down at the terrified child in his arms. That's a longer story. While they waited for the ambulance, Cormac carried Junie to his bathroom and ran warm water over her hands and feet. She didn't speak, just stared at the running faucet like it might betray her too. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" he asked her gently, keeping his voice low and steady. She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely louder than the running water, "I was taking a bath. Mom was downstairs with him. The bad man." She touched the cut on her forehead with one small finger. "He came up and said I was taking too long, that I was wasting water and being a problem." Rage built in Cormac's throat like molten steel, but he forced himself to stay calm. Junie needed him steady, not angry. "What happened next?" "He pushed my head under the water and held it there. I couldn't breathe. The water went up my nose and burned." Her voice cracked. "I thought I was going to die like Daddy." The words hit him like a rifle shot to the chest. She made the connection between what happened to her father and what almost happened to her. "How did you get away?" I bit his hand really hard. He let go and called me a bad word. I ran out of the bathroom and down the stairs. Her voice grew even smaller. Mom was yelling at him, saying he wasn't supposed to hurt me where it would show, that there were better ways. The implications of those words made Cormac's blood freeze. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. This was planned, calculated. They discussed how to kill a 5-year-old child without leaving evidence. "How did you get here, sweetheart?" I ran out the back door. Mom was still yelling at him. I ran through the woods behind our house. She looked up at him with brown eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. "I remembered you said I could always come here if I was scared." He had said that 3 months ago at Ezra's funeral. He'd knelt down beside her while she stood next to the grave in her little black dress, and he'd promised her that Uncle Cormac's house was always safe. He just never thought she'd need to take him up on that promise. Sirens wailed in the distance. Junie pressed her face against his shoulder. "Are you going to send me back?" "No." The word came out hard as iron. "No one's taking you anywhere you don't want to go." The emergency room at Silver Rock General buzzed with late-night chaos. Cormac sat beside Junie's bed while Dr. Peterson examined her injuries. The cut on her forehead needed 3 stitches. Her left shoulder showed finger-shaped bruises. When the doctor checked her neck, purple marks circled her throat like a twisted necklace. "These injuries are consistent with attempted strangulation and forced submersion," Dr. Peterson told the nurse, loud enough for Cormac to hear. "I'm documenting everything." A heavy-set woman in a CPS uniform entered the room. Her badge read Tina Morales. "Mr. Locke, I need to ask you some questions." Cormac stood slowly, his hands clenched. "My niece just survived an attempt on her life. What questions could you possibly have for me? I understand you're upset, but we need to establish what happened tonight." Morales pulled out a tablet. "Junie's mother is on her way. She claims Junie ran away during bath time." "Bullshit." The word came out flat and cold. "Look at those marks on her neck. Look at the fear in her eyes. We're looking at everything, Mr. Locke, but without witnesses. I'm the witness." She told me exactly what happened. Morales sighed. A 5-year-old's testimony isn't always reliable in court. Children can misinterpret situations. Before Cormac could respond, the automatic doors slid open. Lorna Gray rushed in, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. She wore a white sweater and dark jeans that looked expensive. Tears streamed down her face as she ran toward Junie's bed. "Oh my God, baby. I was so worried." Lorna reached for her daughter, but Junie shrank away. "Mrs. Gray," Dr. Peterson stepped between them. "We need to discuss your daughter's injuries." She fell in the bathtub. I only looked away for a second. Lorna's voice cracked with practiced grief. She must have panicked and run out. "I've been searching everywhere." Cormac studied his sister-in-law's face. Her makeup was flawless. Her clothes showed no signs of searching through a rainstorm. Her story had the smooth edges of something rehearsed. "The injuries suggest attempted drowning," Dr. Peterson said carefully. "That's impossible." Lorna's tears flowed harder. There was barely 2 inches of water in the tub. Morales looked between Lorna and Cormac. "We'll need to interview everyone separately. Mr. Locke, since Junie came to you, we're placing her in your temporary custody pending investigation." "What?" Lorna's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold beneath. "She belongs with me. I'm her mother. It's temporary, Morales said, until we can establish what happened. Lorna's gaze found Cormac across the room. For a split second, her grief vanished completely. What replaced it made his blood freeze, pure hatred. Of course, she said, the tears returning. Whatever's best for Junie. I just want her safe. 2 days later, Cormac sat in the sterile office of Westfield Insurance, across from a nervous agent named David Kim. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the stack of files that represented his brother's abbreviated life. Your brother took out this policy just 2 weeks before he died, Kim explained, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with shaking fingers. $500,000. It was highly unusual for someone in his income bracket to qualify for such a large policy so quickly. Cormac stared at the signature on the application. Ezra's handwriting looked shaky, uncertain, not the confident script he'd known since childhood. Did she come with him when he signed? Actually, yes. Mrs. Gray insisted on being present for the entire process. She did most of the talking, explained their reasoning. Kim shuffled through the papers nervously. Said they just realized how dangerous his work was, what with all the chemicals and electrical equipment. Very concerned about their daughter's future if something happened to him. I bet she was. Cormac photographed each document with his phone, the camera flash reflecting off the white pages like lightning. What about the medical exam? Don't policies this large require a physical? That's another unusual aspect. Mrs. Gray found a doctor who could fast-track the examination. Dr. Brennan, he's since left town, actually. Moved to Seattle right after your brother's death. Kim pulled out another file, his hands trembling slightly. The exam was minimal. Blood pressure, basic questions about family history. Nothing like the comprehensive physical we usually require. Convenient. It was all legal, technically, but it felt rushed, pressured. Kim glanced toward his office door, then leaned forward and lowered his voice. Between you and me, Mr. Locke, I've been in this business for 15 years. I can usually tell when someone's trying to pull something over on us. And your brother seemed scared when he came in, kept looking over his shoulder, checking his phone. When I asked if he had any concerns about his personal safety, it's a standard question for large policies, Mrs. Gray answered before he could speak. Cormac felt that familiar ice forming in his chest. What did she say? That he was just being paranoid. That he'd been having nightmares about workshop accidents since a friend of his died in a fire the year before. Kim pulled off his glasses and cleaned them obsessively. But when I looked at your brother, he was staring at her like she'd just revealed something important. You think he suspected something? I think he knew he was in danger. And I think he was trying to leave his daughter something in case the worst happened. Kim replaced his glasses and met Cormac's eyes directly. Mr. Locke, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but something felt very wrong about the whole situation. Wrong how? The fire investigation, for one thing. The department ruled it accidental, but their report had some glaring inconsistencies that never got properly addressed. What kind of inconsistencies? Kim pulled out a manila folder marked confidential in red letters. I have a copy of the preliminary fire marshal's report. The ignition point was near your brother's workbench, concentrated around a specific area where he kept his most expensive tools. They found traces of accelerant gasoline, but the burn pattern suggested it was poured in a deliberate pattern, not spilled accidentally. Ezra would never leave fuel lying around his workspace. That's what the investigator noted. Your brother had a reputation for safety that bordered on obsessive. The fire marshal wanted to investigate further, but Mrs. Gray's lawyer applied pressure to close the case quickly. Kim opened the folder and showed Cormac crime scene photos that made his stomach clench. She insisted on cremation within 48 hours. Said she couldn't bear to leave him intact any longer than necessary. Cormac stared at the photos of his brother's burned workshop. Even in the destruction, he could see evidence of Ezra's meticulous nature tools organized by size, safety equipment properly stored, fire extinguishers placed at strategic intervals. This wasn't the workspace of someone careless with flammable materials. No autopsy. None. The body was badly burned, which made identification difficult, but there were still tests they could have run. Toxicology, blood analysis to determine if he was conscious during the fire. Kim's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Mrs. Gray's lawyer argued that further delays would cause unnecessary emotional trauma to the family. What lawyer? Marcus Webb from Portland. High-end criminal defense attorney. Strange choice for what was supposed to be an accidental death, don't you think? Cormac stood and shook Kim's hand. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Locke. For what it's worth, I don't think your brother's death was an accident. That afternoon, Cormac drove through Silver Rock's narrow streets to the mechanic shop where Ezra had worked for the past 5 years. Ray's Auto Repair sat on the edge of the industrial district, a squat building with roll-up doors and the permanent smell of motor oil and honest sweat. Silas Ray was under the hood of a Ford pickup, his weathered hands deep in the engine bay like a surgeon performing delicate operation. At 58, Silas had taught both Locke brothers everything they knew about fixing engines, and he'd been like a father to them after their parents died in that house fire when Cormac was 19 and Ezra just 13. Cormac. Silas straightened up slowly, his back protesting years of bending over engine blocks. He wiped his hands on a red shop rag that had seen better decades. How's the little one doing? She's staying with me for now. Barely says 10 words a day, and she wakes up screaming most nights. Cormac leaned against the workbench where Ezra used to organize his tools with military precision. I need to ask you about my brother. Silas's expression darkened like storm clouds gathering over the Pacific. He threw the rag down with more force than necessary. I wonder when you'd come around asking questions. Took you longer than I expected. You think something was wrong, too? Hell yes, I think something was wrong. Silas pulled 2 bottles of beer from a mini fridge covered in grease stains and handed one to Cormac. Ezra was terrified the last month of his life. Jumpy as a cat in a thunderstorm. Kept looking over his shoulder like someone was following him. Did he say why? Not directly. You know how Ezra was never wanted to burden anyone with his problems. Silas took a long drink, his Adam's apple bobbing. But he mentioned Lorna was acting strange. Hiding money. Taking phone calls at odd hours. Leaving the house without explanation. When did this start? About 6 weeks before he died. He came in one morning with scratches on his face. Said he'd confronted Lorna about some text messages he'd seen on her phone. She claimed it was work-related, but Ezra said the numbers didn't add up. Cormac felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form in his mind. What kind of text messages? Meeting times, locations. Nothing explicitly romantic, but the tone bothered him. Silas gestured toward Ezra's old workstation, which remained exactly as he'd left it 3 months ago. The day before he died, he pulled me aside and said something that's been eating at me ever since. What? He said if anything happened to him, those were his exact words. If anything happens to me, I should watch out for Junie. Said Lorna was lying about everything, and his daughter might be in danger. The words hit Cormac like a physical blow. He knew someone was planning to kill him. I think so, and I think he was trying to gather evidence to protect himself and Junie. Silas walked over to Ezra's workstation and pulled out the red toolbox that had belonged to their father. He had something here about a week before he died. Said it was insurance of his own kind. They searched through the toolbox methodically. Ezra's tools were still arranged with obsessive precision, wrenches organized by size, screwdrivers sorted by type, every socket in its designated place. But behind a stack of repair manuals in the bottom drawer, Silas found something that didn't belong to a small flip phone, the kind criminals use for untraceable communication. Cormac turned it on with hands that shook slightly. The battery was nearly dead, but one voicemail waited in the inbox, sent the day before Ezra died. His brother's voice filled the garage, shaky and afraid in a way that made Cormac's chest tighten. If you're hearing this, something happened to me. I found proof that Lorna's been meeting someone behind my back. I don't know who he is, but I know she's planning something. I have pictures. I have evidence. Watch Junie, she's not safe with her mother. Lorna's lying about everything. The phone has. The message cut off abruptly, leaving only silence and the echo of his brother's terror. Cormac scrolled through the phone's photo gallery with trembling fingers. 3 pictures showed Lorna meeting a man in the parking lot of the Ocean View Diner on the outskirts of town. The man was tall and muscular, with close-cropped dark hair and the rigid posture of military training. In the first photo, they were sitting across from each other at a corner booth. In the second, he was handing her an envelope. In the final photo, taken through the diner's window, they were kissing with the desperate passion of people who thought they were unobserved. "Recognize him?" Cormac asked, showing Silas the screen. Silas squinted at the photos, adjusting his reading glasses. "Never seen him before in my life. But those look recent, maybe a week or two old, based on what Lorna's wearing. Ezra took these right before he died." Cormac pocketed the phone, his mind already working through the implications. "This guy, whoever he is, was involved in planning my brother's murder. What are you going to do? Find out who he is, then make sure he pays for what he did." That evening, Cormac sat on his couch with Junie, watching her draw in a coloring book. She'd been quiet since coming home from the hospital, but he could see her mind working behind those brown eyes. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. She nodded without looking up from her picture. "You mentioned a bad man the night you came here. Can you tell me more about him?" Junie's crayon stopped moving. She set it down and pulled out a blank piece of paper. "I'll draw him." For the next 10 minutes, she worked in silence. When she finished, she handed him the paper. The drawing showed a man with short hair and angry eyes. He stood behind a bathroom mirror, watching. "He would look at me when I took baths," she whispered. "Mom said I was imagining things." Rage boiled in Cormac's chest, but he kept his voice calm. "How long has he been coming around?" "Since after Daddy died. He sleeps in Daddy's bed now." She picked up a black crayon and scribbled over the man's face. "I don't like him. What else does he do? He tells Mom things about me. Says I'm a problem. That I remember too much." Junie looked up at him with scared eyes. "Do I remember too much, Uncle Cormac?" "No, sweetheart. You remember exactly what happened. And that's not a problem." She curled up against his side. "I heard them talking about Daddy's workshop. The bad man said the fire was supposed to look different." Cormac's blood turned to ice. "When did you hear this?" "The night before the bath. I got up to get water, and they were whispering in the kitchen." Her small voice grew even quieter. "Mom said I might have to go away forever. That's not going to happen." He pulled her closer. "You're staying right here with me." The next morning, Cormac drove to the house next to Lorna's. Nora Hartwell had lived there for 30 years and knew everyone's business in the neighborhood. She answered the door in a flowered robe, her gray hair in curlers. "Cormac, how's that sweet little girl doing?" "She's safe. I wanted to ask you about something." He pulled out the photo from Ezra's phone. "Have you seen this man around Lorna's house?" Nora studied the picture, her eyes widening. "Oh my, yes. He's been coming around for months. Always parks down the street and walks up." "How often?" "Several nights a week, especially after Ezra died. Drives a black pickup truck." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I always thought it was strange how quickly Lorna moved on after losing her husband. Did you ever see them together before Ezra died? That's what made me suspicious. He started showing up while Ezra was still alive. Always came when Ezra was working late." Nora shook her head. "I should have said something. What about the night of the fire?" "That's the odd thing. He was here that night, but he left around 9. Ezra didn't get home until after 10. She paused. "I remember because I was watching the news when the fire trucks went by." Cormac thanked her and returned to his truck. The timeline was becoming clear. Lorna's lover had established an alibi before the fire started, but someone had to be there to set it. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or the girl pays the price." Cormac stared at the message, his hands shaking with fury. They were threatening Junie now. That was their first mistake, that he drove straight to the sheriff's station. Deputy Kelsaboon looked younger than her 29 years, but her eyes held the hardness of someone who'd seen too much violence. She sat across from Cormac in the interview room, reviewing the evidence he'd brought. "The voicemail is compelling," she admitted, "but it's not enough for murder charges." "What about the insurance policy? The cremation without autopsy?" Cormac leaned forward. "She burned my brother for money. Suspicious, yes. Criminal proof, no." Boone set down the photos from Ezra's phone. "These show infidelity, not murder. And 5-year-olds don't make reliable witnesses in court. Someone threatened my niece yesterday." He showed her the text message. "From a burner phone. Untraceable." Boone sighed. "Look, I believe you. Something stinks about this whole situation. But belief doesn't build a case. Then what do I do? Be patient. Keep gathering evidence. Her voice hardened. And whatever you're thinking about doing yourself, don't. That's a road you can't come back from. Cormac stood to leave. I've already been down roads I can't come back from. That afternoon, Cormac used his military contacts to run a background check on the man in Ezra's photos. The facial recognition software took 2 hours to find match. Miles Kincaid, 36 years old. Former Special Forces, discharged after a psychological evaluation. His record showed 3 domestic violence arrests, 2 restraining orders, and 1 sealed assault case. The man was a ghost, moving from town to town every few months. His last known address was a motel outside Portland, but employment records showed him working construction jobs for cash. Cormac called his old sergeant, Pete Morrison, who now worked private security. I remember Kincaid, Morrison said over the phone. Dangerous son of a bitch. Had anger issues and a god complex. Command discharged him after he nearly killed a local during a bar fight overseas. What's his specialty? Explosives and infiltration. Could make anything look like an accident. Morrison paused. Why are you asking about him? He might have killed my brother. Jesus, Cormac. If he's involved, you need to be careful. Kincaid doesn't leave loose ends. For 3 days, Cormac followed Lorna's routine with the patience he'd learned in Afghanistan, where one moment of impatience could mean the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. She went to work at Silver Rock Savings and Loan, where she worked as a loan officer in pressed suits and calculated smiles. She picked up groceries at the Safeway, always choosing the checkout lane with the youngest cashier, someone who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions about her recently deceased husband. She visited the Ocean View Cemetery, where Ezra's ashes were buried under a simple granite headstone, performing the role of grieving widow for anyone who might be watching. But on Thursday afternoon, her routine changed. Instead of driving home after work, she took Highway 101 south toward the outskirts of town. Cormac followed at a distance, keeping 2 cars between them as she pulled into the parking lot of the Driftwood Cafe, a rundown coffee shop that catered to truckers and tourists who'd taken a wrong turn. He parked across the street behind a panel van and pulled out his binoculars, the same military-grade optics that had helped him spot IED emplacements in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Through the cafe's rain-streaked windows, he watched Lorna choose a corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances, the choice of someone who understood the value of situational awareness. 10 minutes later, a black pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. The driver was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the economical precision of someone comfortable with violence. Even from a distance, Cormac could see the rigid posture and scanning eyes of military training. Miles Kincaid. It had to be the man from Ezra's photos. Cormac pulled out his phone and started recording as Kincaid entered the cafe and embraced Lorna at the corner table. Their body language showed intimate familiarity, the casual way he placed his hand on her lower back, how she leaned into him despite being in a public place. This wasn't a recent relationship. They'd been lovers for months, maybe longer. Their conversation was heated, even from across the street. Lorna pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. Kincaid opened it and counted what looked like a substantial amount of cash, his lips moving as he sorted the bills. When he finished counting, he said something that made Lorna's face go pale. The argument escalated. Kincaid grabbed Lorna's wrist hard enough to make her wince, his knuckles white with pressure. She tried to pull away, but he held her tight while speaking directly into her ear. Whatever he said made her stop struggling and nod quickly. When he finally released her, red marks circled her wrist like finger-shaped bruises. She rubbed the injured area while speaking rapidly, her words too fast for him to lip-read. Kincaid smiled coldly and said something that made her lean back in fear. They separated after exactly 23 minutes. Lorna left first, driving quickly back toward town with the jerky movements of someone badly shaken. Kincaid waited 5 minutes before following, but instead of heading toward Silver Rock, he drove further south on Highway 101. Cormac followed the pickup truck to a rundown motel called the Sea Breeze Inn, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask for ID. Room 23. The black pickup truck, a Chevy Silverado with Oregon plates, sat in the parking slot like a predator waiting to strike. That night, Cormac called his old sergeant, Pete Morrison, who now worked private security in Portland. If anyone could help him identify a dangerous ex-military man, it would be Pete. "I need a favor," Cormac said without preamble. "I've got photos of someone I think might have killed my brother." "Jesus, Cormac. You sure about that?" "I'm sure about everything except his name." He texted the clearest photo from Ezra's phone to Pete's number. "Military bearing. Probably special forces based on how he moves. Dangerous son of a bitch." Pete was quiet for several minutes. Then, "Holy shit. That's Miles Kincaid. You know him?" "Know of him. We served in different units. But his reputation preceded him everywhere he went." Pete's voice grew serious. "He's exactly the kind of man you don't want to cross, Cormac. Explosive specialist, hand-to-hand combat expert, and completely unstable." "What's his story?" "Discharged after a psychological evaluation about 3 years ago. Had a pattern of excessive violence, even by military standards. Beat a local national nearly to death during a bar fight in Kandahar. Command decided he was more dangerous to our own people than to the enemy." Cormac felt ice forming in his veins. "What's his specialty?" "Explosives and infiltration. Could make anything look like an accident, bridge collapses, building fires, car crashes. The kind of skills that transfer well to civilian murder." Morrison paused. "Why are you asking about it, Cormac? And don't lie to me. He might have killed my brother and tried to kill my 5-year-old niece." "Mother of God." Pete's voice turned urgent. "Listen to me very carefully. If Kincaid's involved in this, you need to be extremely careful. He doesn't leave loose ends, and he doesn't show mercy. Call the police right now. The police need evidence. I'm working on getting it. Then work fast. And watch your back. Kincaid's the kind of man who kills people for looking at him wrong." Friday morning, Cormac returned to the sheriff's station with the video of Lorna and Miles together. Deputy Boone watched the footage twice. "This proves they know each other," she said carefully. "It doesn't prove murder. She's paying him off 4 days after my brother's funeral. Could be anything. Blackmail, debts, services rendered." Boone closed the laptop. "I ran Kincaid's background. You're right about him being dangerous. But we need concrete evidence linking him to your brother's death." "What about the threat against Junie?" "We can't prove he sent it." Boone stood up, pacing the small room. "Here's what I can do. I'll put Kincaid under surveillance, see if he makes any moves. But you need to stay away from this while he plans his next move. Cormac, I get it. Someone killed your brother and tried to hurt your niece. You want justice." Her voice softened. "But if you take matters into your own hands, you become the criminal. Then who protects Junie?" The logic hit home, but the rage still burned. "How long do we wait?" "Give me a week. Let me work this officially." Boone walked him to the door. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid." Cormac looked her in the eyes. "I promise I won't do anything they don't deserve." That afternoon, Cormac picked up Junie from school. She'd been staying with his neighbor during the day, but he made sure to handle pickup and drop off himself. "Uncle Cormac," she said as they drove home, "are the bad people going to come back?" "Not if I can help it." "But what if you can't help it?" The question cut deep. She was 5 years old and already understood that adults couldn't protect her from everything. "Then I'll make sure they regret it." That evening, while Junie watched cartoons, Cormac sat in his workshop cleaning his service pistol. He'd brought it home from Afghanistan, along with too many memories and a steel plate in his left leg. His phone rang. Silas Ray. "Cormac, someone broke into the shop last night. They tore apart Ezra's old workstation." "What did they take?" "That's the weird part. Nothing valuable. Just went through his tools and papers." Silas paused. "They were looking for something specific." "The phone. Had to be. Good thing you took it when you did." Cormac looked through his window at Junie, safe on his couch. "For now. They're getting desperate," he told Silas. "Desperate people do stupid things." "Yeah, they do." Sunday night arrived with the kind of Pacific Northwest storm that rattled windows and sent tree branches scraping against roofs like skeletal fingers. Cormac tucked Junie into the spare bedroom that had become hers over the past week. The room now decorated with her drawings of happier times, pictures of her father teaching her to use tools, memories of better days before the monsters entered her life. "Sweet dreams, kiddo," he whispered, checking the window locks for the third time since dinner. The locks were solid steel, the kind that would take serious tools to breach, but paranoia had kept him alive in Afghanistan, and it would keep Junie safe now. She looked up at him with brown eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. "Uncle Cormac? Are the bad people going to come tonight?" The question cut through him like a blade. She'd asked it every night since coming to stay with him, and each time it reminded him of how completely her innocence had been shattered. "Not if I can help it. But if anything happens, you remember what we practiced. Hide in the bathroom closet. Lock the door. Don't come out until you say the special word." "That's right. Oklahoma. Don't come out for anyone else, even if they say they're police." She nodded solemnly and pulled her father's old work shirt, the one that still smelled like motor oil and honest sweat, up to her chin like armor against the darkness. Cormac was washing dishes in the kitchen, his service pistol within easy reach on the counter, when every light in the house suddenly died. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The digital clock on a microwave went dark. Someone had cut his power. He grabbed his pistol and moved to the living room window, staying low and using the heavy curtains for concealment. A figure in dark clothes moved across his front yard like a shadow, heading toward the back of the house with practiced stealth. Military movement patterns, staying low, using available cover, minimizing exposure time. "Junie," he called softly but urgently. "Code red. Go now." Her bare feet pattered down the hallway, and the bathroom door clicked shut with a sound that meant safety, at least temporarily. Glass shattered in the kitchen, not the random breakage of weather or accident, but the deliberate destruction of someone making an entry point. Cormac moved toward the sound, his pistol raised and ready. Muscle memory from a dozen firefights in the mountains of Afghanistan taking over. A man in a black ski mask climbed through the broken window, a steel crowbar gleaming in his gloved hand. Even masked, Cormac recognized the build and movement patterns from his surveillance at the cafe. Miles Kincaid had come calling. Looking for something, Cormac stepped into the kitchen doorway, his pistol trained center mass on the intruder. Kincaid spun around with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with violence, raising the crowbar in a defensive position. "Where's the phone?" "What phone?" Cormac kept his voice level, professional. Let the man think he was dealing with a scared civilian instead of someone who'd survived 3 tours in a war zone. "Don't play games with me, Locke." Kincaid's voice carried the flat, emotionless tone of a professional killer. "Your brother recorded things he shouldn't have. Things that could cause problems for certain people. Maybe he recorded you murdering him." Kincaid laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "He was already dead when I got there. Lorna handles the close work herself. She's got a real talent for violence when properly motivated." The admission hit Cormac like a physical blow to the solar plexus. His brother's wife, the woman Ezra had loved enough to marry, the mother of his child, had personally murdered him with her own hands. She lit the fire, poured the gasoline, struck the match, watched him burn. Kincaid stepped closer, testing Cormac's resolve. "I just made sure the scene looked convincing afterward. Moved some tools around, created the right burn patterns. Made it look like an industrial accident instead of what it really was, which was execution." Your brother got too curious about Lorna's finances, started asking questions about where she was getting extra money. She couldn't risk him finding out about our arrangement. Rage built in Cormac's chest like molten steel, but he forced himself to stay calm. Information was power, and right now he needed to know everything. "What arrangement?" "Insurance fraud, for starters. She's been planning this for over a year, found the perfect mark in your pathetic brother. Married him, convinced him to take out a massive policy, then eliminated him when the timing was right." Kincaid grinned behind his mask. "But that's just the beginning. Lorna's got bigger plans, and your niece is a loose end that needs tying up. Over my dead body. That can be arranged." Kincaid lunged with the crowbar, swinging it in a vicious arc toward Cormac's head. Cormac dodged left, but his damaged leg slowed him down just enough. The metal bar caught him across the ribs with a crack that sent fire through his entire torso. He gasped and stumbled backward, his finger tightening on the pistol's trigger. But Kincaid was already moving, grabbing Cormac's wrist and slamming it against the doorframe. The pistol skittered across the kitchen floor, spinning under the stove and out of reach. They went down hard, rolling across broken glass and kitchen debris. Kincaid was younger, faster, and had the advantage of surprise, but Cormac had learned to fight dirty in the mountains where rules were luxuries that got you killed. He drove his thumb into Kincaid's left eye, pressing hard enough to feel the socket give slightly. Kincaid screamed and loosened his grip long enough for Cormac to hammer his fist into the man's throat, targeting the soft spot just below the Adam's apple. Kincaid broke free and scrambled for the crowbar, but Cormac was faster. He snatched the steel bar and swung it in a brutal arc, catching Kincaid across the shoulder with enough force to shatter bone. The man screamed and stumbled toward the window, blood streaming down his left arm. "Tell Lorna this isn't over," Cormac called after him, breathing hard and tasting blood in his mouth. Kincaid paused at the window, his good hand pressed against his injured shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and thick in the dim light from the street. "You should have minded your own business, Locke. My brother was my business. So is protecting his daughter. Your brother was weak. A small-town mechanic who thought he could play in the big leagues." Kincaid's voice turned venomous. "Just like you. You think because you played soldier for a few years, you can handle real players?" Cormac took a step forward, the crowbar raised and ready. Every instinct he'd developed in combat zones screamed at him to finish this now, to eliminate the threat permanently before it could strike again. "Get out," he said quietly, "before I decide you're not worth keeping alive." Kincaid climbed through the window and disappeared into the storm, leaving only broken glass and the metallic scent of blood to mark his passage. Cormac checked the bathroom door. "Junie? It's safe now." "Oklahoma." She emerged from the closet slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Was that the bad man? The one who hurt Daddy?" "Yeah, but he's gone now, and he's hurt worse than we are. Is he coming back?" Cormac pulled her close, feeling her small body shake against his chest. Blood from his split ribs stained his shirt, but the injury was superficial, nothing compared to what he'd survived overseas. "If he does, I'll be ready for him." But as he called 911 to report the break-in, Cormac knew the truth with cold certainty. Kincaid wouldn't give up. Neither would Lorna. They'd killed once to protect their secret, and they'd proven tonight that they were willing to kill again to keep it buried. The war was just beginning. Deputy Boone arrived 20 minutes after the ambulance. Cormac's ribs were bruised, but not broken. The paramedic bandaged the cuts and recommended rest. Blood on the window frame, Boone noted, photographing the scene. "If we can match DNA to Kincaid, we can arrest him for breaking and entering. He admitted killing Ezra. To you. No recording, no witnesses." Boone holstered her camera. "But this escalation changes things. I can justify putting protection on you and Junie. Protection won't stop them. They're getting desperate." "What do you mean?" Cormac looked at Junie, who was drawing another picture at the kitchen table. This one showed stick figures fighting. "Desperate animals make mistakes," he said quietly. "Time to give them something to be desperate about." The next morning, Cormac sat in his truck outside Silas's shop, the manila folder on the passenger seat filled with blank papers that would serve as bait for desperate predators. His ribs ached where Kincaid's crowbar had connected, but the pain only sharpened his focus. Pain meant he was alive, and alive meant he could still protect Junie. "You want to use me as bait?" Silas asked when Cormac explained his plan. They stood in the shop's office, surrounded by decades of automotive history calendars from part suppliers, photos of classic cars, the accumulated debris of honest work. "I want to give them a target they can't resist." Cormac pulled out the folder and showed Silas the convincing-looking documents inside. "We spread word that I'm turning over new evidence to the state attorney's office tomorrow morning. Make them think this file contains proof they killed Ezra. And when they come for it, Deputy Boone will be waiting with backup. We catch them in the act, and this time there won't be any question about evidence or witnesses." Silas grinned, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I like it. Reminds me of the time your dad helped me catch those kids who were stealing tools. Sometimes the best way to catch a rat is to give it exactly what it wants. What do you need me to do?" "Leave this folder on your desk tonight. Make sure the shop lights are on and the back door is unlocked. Make it look like an easy target. Tell everyone who'll listen that I asked you to hold it until morning. Consider it done. What about Junie? She'll be safe. I'm taking her to stay with my neighbor tonight. Mrs. Peterson is a retired teacher, knows how to keep kids calm and quiet. Cormac checked his watch. I need to spread the word around town this afternoon. Cormac's first stop was Morrison's Hardware, where he made sure to speak loudly enough for the 3 other customers to hear him talking to Bob Morrison about finally having enough evidence to put Lorna away. Shame what happened to your brother, Bob said, genuinely sympathetic. Always seemed like a good man. Quiet, kept to himself, but good with engines. He was the best mechanic in the county. But the people who killed him are going to pay for what they did. Cormac made sure his voice carried to the elderly woman examining paint samples near the register. Got a meeting with the state attorney tomorrow morning. Turns out Ezra was smarter than they thought. He documented everything. By noon, he'd visited the post office, the grocery store, and the bank where Lorna worked. At each stop, he made sure to mention his conversation with law enforcement officials and his plans to turn over evidence that would finally bring Ezra's killers to justice. The last stop was the most important and the most dangerous. He walked into his Silver Rock Savings and Loan at exactly 2:30 p.m. when he knew Lorna would be finishing her lunch break. She sat behind her desk in the loan department, looking like a grieving widow in her black dress and subdued makeup. When she saw him approaching, something flickered behind her eyes: fear, maybe, or calculation. Cormac. Her voice was carefully neutral. How are you? How's Junie? She's safe. Finally, he sat down across from her desk, noting how her hands trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. I wanted to thank you. Thank me for helping me understand what really happened to Ezra. Turns out he was even smarter than I thought, left a lot more evidence than anyone realized. The color drained from Lorna's face. I don't understand. Sure you do. But don't worry, by tomorrow morning, everyone will understand. State attorney's very interested in what Ezra documented before he died. Cormac stood to leave, then paused. You might want to call your lawyer. The expensive one from Portland. Something tells me you're going to need him. He walked out without looking back, but he could feel her eyes burning into his shoulders like laser sights. That evening, Deputy Boone positioned herself in the darkened office of the auto parts store across from Silas's shop. She'd brought 2 other officers in unmarked cars, positioning them at strategic points around the building. The trap was set. You sure about this? She asked Cormac over the radio. If this goes wrong, we could be looking at officer-involved shootings. It won't go wrong. Kincaid's desperate now. He'll come tonight. Cormac sat in his own truck 3 blocks away, close enough to respond if needed, but far enough to avoid spooking his prey. Just remember, he's Special Forces trained. Don't underestimate him. At 2:17 a.m., a dark figure approached the shop's back door with the fluid movements of professional training. Miles Kincaid, his left arm still in a makeshift sling from their kitchen encounter. He picked the lock with tools that gleamed silver in the streetlight, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Deputy Boone counted to 60 after he disappeared inside, giving him time to locate the folder and commit to the crime. Then she keyed her radio. All units, suspect is inside and moving toward the target. Moving on my mark. Kincaid triggered the motion sensor as he entered the main workspace, and floodlights bathed the shop in harsh white illumination. He grabbed the folder from Silas's desk and ran for the back door, but 3 deputies were already positioning themselves in the alley. Police, drop the folder and get on the ground. Kincaid pulled a knife from his belt, a military-issue combat blade designed for killing, not utility work. But before he could use it, 2 tasers hit him simultaneously, dropping him to the concrete in convulsions. Miles Kincaid, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder, Deputy Boone announced as they secured his hands behind his back. This is harassment, Kincaid gasped, still shaking from the electrical shock. I was just stealing evidence in a murder investigation. Boone held up the folder, making sure he could see it. We'll add that to the charges, along with assault with a deadly weapon from your little visit to Mr. Locke's house. The knife lay on the ground beside him, its edge gleaming with the promise of violence that would never be delivered. In the interview room, Kincaid sat silent for 2 hours. His lawyer arrived from Portland, expensive suit and cold eyes. "My client has nothing to say." "That's fine," Boone said, "because we have plenty to talk about. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit murder. You have no proof of any conspiracy." Boone opened a file and spread photos across the table. Kincaid and Lorna embracing at the coffee shop. Financial records showing payments from her account to his. The threatening text message. "Your client has been in a relationship with the victim's wife. She's been paying him substantial amounts of cash. And someone threatened the victim's daughter to stop the investigation." Kincaid's lawyer studied the photos. "This is circumstantial at best. Maybe, but it's enough to hold him while we dig deeper." Boone leaned forward. "DNA from the blood at the break-in scene matches your client. The assault charges alone will put him away for 5 years." The lawyer whispered something to Kincaid, whose face went pale. "I want to make a deal," Kincaid said suddenly. "No deals," his lawyer hissed. "We haven't seen the full evidence. I'm not going down for murder." Kincaid looked directly at Boone. "Lorna Gray killed her husband. I helped stage the scene, but I didn't light the fire." The room fell silent. Even the lawyer looked stunned. "Why?" Boone asked. "She wanted the insurance money and freedom to be with me," said Ezra was suspicious and starting to ask questions. Kincaid rubbed his temples. "The plan was to make it look like an industrial accident." "What about Junie?" "The kid saw too much. Lorna tried to handle it quietly, but I lost my temper that night." He touched his bandaged eye where Cormac had thumbed him. "I was supposed to make it look like a drowning accident." Boone felt sick. "You tried to kill a 5-year-old. Lorna said it was necessary. Clean slate, fresh start." Kincaid's voice turned bitter. "But the little brat bit me and ran. And now you're going to testify against her." "Damn right I am. She threw me under the bus the minute things got complicated." But when the police arrived at Lorna's house that afternoon, they found it empty. Neighbors said she'd left that morning with 2 suitcases and a desperate look in her eyes. "We have an APB out on her car," Boone told Cormac over the phone. "She can't get far. She had a head start. Could be in Canada by now. We'll find her." But Cormac was already moving. He remembered something Ezra had mentioned once about a cabin Lorna's family owned near the coast. A place where she used to meet Kincaid that he called Silas. "Do you remember Lorna talking about a family cabin?" "Yeah, up near Nesgowan. Her grandfather's place. Ezra took Junie there once for a weekend." "Do you have an address?" "Not exact, but it's on Dory Lane. Red cabin with a green roof." "Why?" "Just a hunch." Cormac hung up and checked his pistol. Junie was safe at the neighbor's house, and Boone was tied up with Kincaid's confession. This was something he needed to handle alone. The cabin sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Lorna's white sedan was parked behind the building, hidden from the road. Smoke rose from the chimney. Cormac parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot. Through the front window, he saw Lorna pacing back and forth, talking on her phone. "I don't care what Miles said," she was shouting. "I'm not going to prison for this." Cormac tried the back door. Unlocked. He slipped inside and moved through the small kitchen toward the living room. "The money's in the car," Lorna continued. "I'll be across the border in 4 hours. This whole town can go to hell." A small voice came from the bedroom. "Mommy? I'm scared." "Junie." Somehow, Lorna had gotten to her. Rage exploded in Cormac's chest. He stepped into the living room, his pistol drawn. In the call, Lorna spun around, her face cycling through shock, fear, and finally cold calculation. "Uncle Cormac." Junie's voice called from the bedroom. "Help me." "She's fine," Lorna said, slowly hanging up the phone. "For now. Let her go. This is between us." "No, it's not." Lorna moved toward the bedroom door. "She's the only witness who can connect me to Ezra's death. Even with Miles singing, I can beat this without her testimony. You're talking about murdering a child. I'm talking about survival." Lorna's mask finally dropped completely. "You think I wanted to kill Ezra? He was useful, but he got suspicious, started following me. I had no choice." "You always have a choice." "Do you?" She pulled a kitchen knife from behind her back. "Because right now you can choose to let me walk away or watch your niece die." She disappeared into the bedroom. Cormac heard Junie cry out, then Lorna's voice, deadly calm. "Put the gun down and kick it away, or I open her throat." Cormac set his pistol on the floor and pushed it across the room. Lorna emerged with Junie held in front of her, the knife pressed to the child's neck. Junie's eyes were wide with terror. "You destroyed everything," Lorna snarled. "I had a perfect plan. New life, new identity, enough money to disappear forever, built on my brother's grave. Your brother was weak, a small-town mechanic with small dreams." The knife pressed closer to Junie's skin. "I deserved better. What you deserve is hell." Lorna laughed bitterly. "Maybe, but I'll take my chances on the run rather than in prison." She started backing toward the front door, dragging Junie with her. But the child had been watching and learning. When they reached the coffee table, Junie suddenly went limp, dropping her full weight downward. Lorna's grip slipped, and the knife moved away from the little girl's throat. Cormac lunged forward, tackling Lorna around the waist. They crashed into the wall, and the knife clattered across the floor. Lorna clawed at his eyes, screaming like a wild animal. He pinned her arms and looked in her face, the same face Ezra had loved, now twisted with pure hatred. "You took everything from me," she hissed. "No," he said quietly. "You threw it all away." Sirens wailed in the distance. Deputy Boone's voice came from outside. "Police! Surround the building." Lorna's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the grieving widow she'd pretended to be. "I never wanted children," she whispered. "Ezra trapped me with her. I was supposed to be free." "You don't get free," Cormac said, his voice cold as winter steel. "You get judged." 3 months later, Cormac stood in the courthouse hallway as Lorna Gray was led away in shackles. The jury had taken less than 2 hours to convict her of first-degree murder. Miles Kincaid's testimony had sealed her fate. Deputy Boone joined him at the window overlooking Main Street. "Life without parole," she said. "Justice for Ezra." Justice for Ezra would be bringing him back. Cormac watched Lorna disappear into the prison transport van. "This is just consequences. How's Junie handling it?" "Better than expected. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for." That afternoon, Cormac and Junie stood in front of a new building on the east side of town. The sign read Locke Brothers Automotive in bold red letters. "It's beautiful," Junie said, holding his hand. "Daddy would love it. We'll build engines that last forever, just like he always talked about." They walked inside the empty shop. Cormac had used Ezra's life insurance money, the money Lorna never got to touch, to lease the building and buy equipment. "Can I help?" Junie asked. "Every day after school, if you want." That evening, Cormac taught her to strike her first arc with a welding torch. Her small hands shook as she held the metal pieces together. "I'm making a shield," she announced, "like the ones knights used." "What are you protecting against?" "Bad people who try to hurt families." The weld held strong and true. She set down the torch and smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since that terrible night in the rain. "She tried to break what was left of our blood," Cormac said, helping her remove the welding mask. "But fire forges harder steel." Outside, the Oregon rain continued to fall on Silver Rock, washing the streets clean. But inside the shop, 2 survivors built something that would last. A family stronger than the forces that had tried to destroy it. In the end, justice wasn't about forgiveness or moving on. It was about making sure the innocent were protected and the guilty faced consequences. And in Cormac Locke's world, that was enough.